Hey media, we need a rewrite. I'm Erin Trafford, and this is The Fourth Draft. Welcome, welcome. You're back. This is The Fourth Draft, the latest offering from Story Studio Network and from me, Erin Trafford. So happy to have you here for what is officially episode 2. Really appreciate it. I'm having a blast producing this show because I actually feel super free. I feel unencumbered right now. Sometimes I feel like, if you've ever created any kind of content for your business or for your brand or whatever, that sometimes it gets stale and it feels stuck. And that's how I was feeling in my last podcast. And you know what? That happens. That's just a creative process. But with this one, new energy and no stuckness. So happy to be here at episode 2. And today we're going to talk about, or I'm going to share with you some thoughts based on this concept of quitting. No one likes a quitter, or do they? Because, there's this, if you've ever met someone who has been in the news business or who has worked in media or, anyone who even remotely attached to the industry, there's this hushed conversation that happens when you talk about how, when, and why you left your job. And it happens every time. Oh, I used to work for such and such organization and then I left, but I quit. I didn't get fired. Or, oh, I worked for such and such and they laid me off. I didn't quit. They laid me off. There's always this conversation about which flavor of leaving did you choose or did you not choose? Were you shown the door or did you slam the door, so to say? So there's this notion of quitting the media. And I sometimes think that there's this cloud around it because those of us in the business, at least I know from my team, we take our jobs. It's not just a job. For a lot of folks, it's like a vocation. It's deeply, deeply personal. And so when you quit and leave for something else, or something becomes untenable and you can't stay, or you are shown the door in a mass round of impersonal layoffs, there is this deep sense of betrayal. So I want to talk about this concept of quitting. Because if we don't get this, monkey out of the room right now, we're not going to be able to have some really honest conversations in the future. So here's the honest to God truth is that a few weeks ago, was it a few weeks ago? It's probably a couple months ago now. I've had this idea for a while, but let's say a couple months ago, sometime in the summer of 2023, a colleague, someone who I hold in high regard and still do, who I have an intense respect for, on my personal Facebook page, which is shut down to the public, it's just for friends and family, really, people that I actually know. She called me a quitter, like pretty blatantly called me a quitter. And the line was something to the effect of, I'm so effing sick of former broadcasters who quit the business and then shit all over it after they leave. And I'll give you some more context as to where that comment was left. It was left on a post that I wrote about Bill C-18 because it had just come into effect. And, for a long time, you may not know this about me, but part of me running a content empire between the news and now is that I built an entire web-based content distribution company. I had a blog, I had socials, I had a humongous Pinterest account and did strategy on Pinterest and Instagram and all this stuff. So, I really understood email marketing and conversion marketing and copywriting. That's all the stuff that I was doing, digital first. And I learned very early in that business, so more than a decade ago, that the most important thing that you can do for your business is to build on owned land, meaning your own website, your own URL, and not just build there, but create a strategy where you are constantly increasing the value of your owned assets and not your rented assets, which is why I never had the biggest Instagram account. I never had a humongous Facebook following. I never had huge social media, but I had huge strategy to grow the assets that I owned, meaning my blog and my email list. So I made some comment on Facebook saying Bill C18 is a classic example of the hard lessons of realizing that perhaps there are some companies out there, and I was referring to mostly digital publishers, who had built a lot of their interaction and engagement on rented land, namely Facebook. And yeah, it sucks. And yeah, it's really hard to do business these days without Facebook or Instagram or social media. I get it. And it wasn't meant as a judgment. It was merely an observation saying 10 years ago, somebody told me not to do that. And so I made deliberate, specific moves over a decade to safeguard myself and my business. And that was part of the reason I was able to sell that business, is because it wasn't built on rented land. And so I pointed that out. I said, oh, this is a lesson, that we learned in the digital content creation space, 5 or 6 years ago. And her response was, I'm so sick of former broadcasters quitting the business and shitting all over it after they leave. So there was clearly some like vitriol and reaction and emotion there that wasn't fully logical. But the sentiment that I felt was this: she's calling me a quitter. And so after I got over the initial sting of the comment and how abrasive it was, I sat with that discomfort and I really asked myself, why did that hurt to read? Why was I hurt by that comment? Am I a quitter? When I left the news business in 2015, and I left without a real plan, without a safety net, in retrospect, it was kind of stupid that I left, but I built my whole business after that. I had no choice. But I left for a few reasons. I had some reasons why I had to leave. So I'm going to list out 4 of the reasons that I left. There are many, but I want you to hear me express the 4 main reasons I had to leave, right? And just FYI, I also posed this question to the entire team at Story Studio Network. Are we quitters? And we recorded it, and I'm going to share that with you in the next episode because their responses do not necessarily match up with my responses. Really interesting insights. So that's coming. But I'm going to share with you the 4 reasons I left. Number 1, the first reason I left is that the industry then, 2015, 2016, thereabouts, even then, if you were in it, you were feeling the negative turmoil. You were feeling the demands that were starting to pile up to an absolutely untenable level. Untenable. And I'll give you a perfect example. In the short 2 years that I was with Global, my job changed so drastically, despite being protected by a union. We can talk about that later. That I went from being hired as a reporter anchor to being turned into a video journalist, which is just a fancy term for someone who is a literal one-person band, to then being turned into a digital journalist, meaning you are now a one-person band who needs to grow a third arm holding a smartphone, right? I was told that I could be pretty and smart, but not too pretty or smart on either side. If I was too pretty, I would distract the viewers. That was actually said to me. If I was too smart, I would make the viewers feel stupid. So I had to walk this constant line between how I looked and what I knew. And that was expressed in company meetings. Untenable. I was, and this isn't just me. I'm sharing my experience with you, but I am convinced that if you were a woman in broadcasting, you are a woman in broadcasting, you are a man in broadcasting, you have been in broadcasting or in a newsroom, you have felt some of these pressures. This is how it manifests for me, but I'm sure you can feel yourself in this. There was this other kind of subliminal necessity of always being on and always being available. I slept with my freaking BlackBerry under my pillow. Under my pillow. And we know now, 10 years, whatever, 8 years removed, how freaking unhealthy that is. But that was the expectation. That was the growing. If we were going to be digital first, you had to always be digital, which led to, now this is my personal experience, but it led to conversations of what the news organization owned of me, my face. They owned my face. So while I was blogging about things that I was passionate about, my hobbies, I was blogging about my home, about things that I liked to do on the weekend, which, by the way, is what turned into a very large company that I was able to sell. There was value there that they didn't see, but I wasn't allowed to put my face on it. I had hopes for feeling like I was creating significant difference and meaning in other people's lives, this big, expansive, abundant feeling. And by the time I left, I felt so small and so crushed by the pressures that shouldn't have mattered, that again, it felt like a betrayal. Second reason I left, and this one will be short to explain because you'll understand right away, is that with about 18 months into my employment, I discovered there was a male equal counterpart, as in equal experience, same age, on paper, the same, who was making 50% more than I was, despite being in a unionized situation and despite all other things being equal. 50%. We can have a whole conversation and discussion about equity in media, and maybe that I should table that for a broader discussion. In fact, I think I just did. But just suffice to say, when I found that out, that was enough to send me packing. So the day I found that out, I was 1 foot out the door. This one is going to be hard to say, but I will say it, is that the other pressure that pushed me out was that forced me to quit. Because I remember, we're trying to answer, was I a quitter? Was I a quitter? Did I quit? Did I quit? And now am I shitting all over the industry? Or am I just telling you the honest to God truth of why I couldn't stay? The third reason is that management was turning a blind eye. I'm talking about men. I'm talking about women, all of them, to what I will call, quote unquote, not cool behaviors. And in so doing, offering tacit approval and enablement of them, if you know what I'm getting at. And if you've been paying any attention in the Canadian media landscape over the last 2-3 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because we have seen cases unfold very publicly of women who are far more prominent in the industry than I ever was. Jennifer Valentine at Q107, Lisa LaFlamme at CTV News, a handful of women from the e-talk world coming out and saying, I endured some things as a woman that were unacceptable, but were tacitly approved of. So here's what I'll leave you with in this regard, is that if it was happening to them at that highest level, you sure as shit better believe that it was happening and is happening to women across the industry. And I know for a fact that there are moves being made at present to remedy and rectify. And for that, I am eternally grateful. But I wasn't about to wait 10 years in a situation like that and be able to live with myself. So yeah, that was one of the reasons I quit. Or did I? Most importantly, back to that concept of, I started in the media because I wanted to feel free. I wanted to feel possible. I wanted to feel enterprising and connected. And the longer I stayed, the less connected to the why I was, and the more pressurized by the bullshit I was. So I quit, and I'm saying that with air quotes, because Not only did I feel like there was a better way to be in the world, I knew there was a better way to be in the world. So since that day, I know, I've done a bunch of things. I ran that very successful lifestyle blog and that content platform, which I sold for a nice tidy sum last year. In order to start Story Studio Network, I used the seed money. I funded myself. I was also one of the first in Canada to manage influencers because I understood the power of personal brand. I understood the power of connection and of endorsement. That business didn't work out. It was a weird time back in the early 2010s, but heck, I tried. I did it. I learned a lot of things. I have started multiple podcasts, the Fourth Draft being one of them. I honed my ability to partner with brands on content to bridge the gap between content and sales. I spun all of this into a thriving integrated media business. I've been a producer, an executive level content strategist, and now a CEO of a media company that I run myself proudly and diligently every single day. I left radio. I left TV. I left the media. And it resulted in me learning a crap ton of things about the world I never would have learned if I had stayed, because I would have been shrouded in the pressure of the industry. And now I get to apply all of those wonderful learnings and experiences to what I do now for you as I'm growing a new media company. So, did I quit? That's a question I keep asking. And I guess technically I did. But does that make me a quitter? I'm not so sure. All right. That's it for this episode. Thank you. Thank you for tuning into the Fourth Draft. And remember, if you've got your phone in your hand right now, just head on over and rate and review the show on your podcast player of choice. And share the show with anyone you think might like it, because that truly does go a really long way to helping me and you make this little thing we got going on a regular thing. Also, just FYI, my contact info, a little more about the show, about Story Studio Network, all of that is in the show notes. And as always, I appreciate if you connect with me on the socials. I'm pretty hot and heavy on LinkedIn right now. Really loving it. And a little sneak peek for you, we are currently working on revealing officially our new Story Studio Network resource for branded podcasting. And over the next couple episodes, we're going to get into talking more about podcasting. So I'm just giving you the heads up. It's not ready yet, but when it is, it will be in the show notes as well. I'm really excited. And in the next episode, I'm going to start cutting together some of that tape that I collected from the team about this whole concept of quitting, because I think you're going to be interested to hear what they have to say about that. Because, spoiler, it doesn't necessarily match up with what I have to say about it. All right. Thanks for listening to the Fourth Draft.